Both sides of the discussion on arming police officers at URI tonight, right here. Great to have you in the Dan Yorke State of Mind. There we go. That happens sometimes with semi-live television. We're off and ready to go. We got a lot going on here this evening. My guests this evening are Stephen Baker, Director of Public Safety at the University of Rhode Island, and Mary Joe Gonzales, who's an Assistant Vice President for the Student Affairs, and she'll reflect on some of the thoughts that the kids have. Resolutions flying on the campus opposing arming the police officers, while the police officers are understandably saying, we need tools of the trade. So stay tuned for that. Don't go anywhere. Busy night tonight, though. We got a lot going on. Let's go to the rundown real quick and tell you that the data that comes from a new Brown poll that was released today tells me that you think that leadership matters, and I'll tell you why I think that. Holy cow. In Woonsocket, they're calling it a Lisa slide. I wrote Woonsocket landslide, but the new vernacular is Lisa slide. That mayoral election came out a lot different than a lot of people thought it would. What else do we have going on here this evening? We got dimes flying everywhere, or they ought to be. We're closing in on a debt ceiling deadline, and those guys are starting to get some itchy chins, but congratulations to the fellas last night. To the numbers we go. Brown poll, governor's race. Remind you, this is 2014. Not 2013, and neither one of the two people who are talked about here have actually announced that they're running for governor, but it is allegedly a foregone conclusion that they are. Let me put up the headline on the WPRI website today: Raimondo tops Taveras for governor. This is the Taubman Institute from Brown University's data. Can we put it up, Laura? Sure, let's do that. Here's what the big picture looks like. If you were to vote today in a Democratic primary, and reportedly the people who were polled said they would, Gina Raimondo, the state treasurer, has 42% to Angel Taveras' 33%. Now, that is in direct contrast to the Taveras numbers that were leaked out 10 days or so ago that had him with a dramatic, what was it, 13, 14, 15-point lead in a Democratic primary. So I guess we have a little bit of a tabulation difference here. I'm not surprised by that. You can probably split the baby or split the numbers in the middle. I hate that phrase, split the baby. Don't ever let me say that again. It's a terrible thing to say. But there's a reality probably in the middle. But let's take a look at some of the breakdowns of these numbers in the Brown poll. Gina Raimondo amongst independents leads by 14 points over the mayor of Providence. By Democrats, this is the one that has a lot of people saying, what? She leads by almost 2 points, 40 to 38. Now look at the men and the women, the breakdown. The men seem to like Gina Raimondo a little bit more than the women do. And that makes perfect sense to me. You remember I said to you last week that if Gina Raimondo continues to run this I am woman, hear me roar type of campaign, that she's going to get whipped pretty good in this race. I absolutely believe that, because you know what? The chauvinism in the state of Rhode Island leans more heavily women than it does men. Yeah, it does. Weird, almost a little strange, but it does. Look, the bottom line here is this in terms of what these numbers say so early on. Angel Taveras actually has higher favorability ratings in this same poll. Meaning, in general, people seem to like him a little bit better than they like Gina Raimondo. But what must be reflected in this data is that people remember that Gina Raimondo made some very tough leadership decisions and moved the needle on pension reform in a way that they vividly remember. And so it tells you that even subconsciously, leadership really matters to the electorate. Here's what will eventually only matter, and that is vision. If Gina Raimondo doesn't show any vision, she can't win this race, neither can Angel Taveras or anybody else. Now, the Republicans are also part of this data. Alan Fung from Cranston actually fared pretty well. But the bottom line here is, again, I said that twice. Can you have two bottom lines? I guess you can when you're ad-libbing and racing through some dialogue. Vision matters, but people remember leadership, and that's what they remember Gina Raimondo for. So she's not in such bad shape. Some people thought she was in a lot worse shape. All right, let's move on real quick. Next headline, Woonsocket, landslide. They're calling it a Lisa slide. Lisa Baldelli Hunt wins the big primary. Woonsocket call headline there. Leo Fontaine, the mayor of Woonsocket, was here just last Thursday with his economic development plan. And I said, so you got this whole big economic development plan and you're letting go of it here just days before the election? Here's what he said.
My opponent, Representative Baldelli Hunt, was out claiming that some of these ideas that we were talking about were hers. And you know, she declared her candidacy in May. And we were already working on these things long before that. And we want to make sure that the record is clear, that people know what our vision is. Because if they're going to vote for people, they deserve the truth and the ability to assess people on what their ideas are and what their vision is. We can't stick to the status quo of, well, we got a 5-year plan from the Budget Commission. That's baseline. Yeah. We need to find a way to lift it up.
Here's what you need to find a way to do, Leo. You got to get out of bed, because I understand you slept in hurting pretty good this morning, took a formal day off. And you better figure out how to sell this economic plan in a big, big way. Closing a 3-to-1 gap in a general election in Woonsocket may be all too difficult to do. It was a smaller turnout in a preliminary election, but there's no doubt that when people see bad economic times, they want change. She's familiar. They've elected her before as state rep. She's formidable, and she looks like she's dominating. But you never know until the last vote's counted in general election. We'll follow this race closely because that city matters to this community. All right, let's move on. What else do we have here? This is funny. The Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority today made a decision. The decision's about how they're going to collect the tolls. You know, this is a 10-cent toll. I mean, I drive over that bridge and I look at the stupid digital sign. I'm thinking, are you guys serious? David Darlington, the wonderful guy who is the chairman of the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, told our radio news team at WPRO the following today.
The Bridge Authority has voted to send out invoices to anybody who's used the Secundit River Bridge more than 25 times that has not been billed through an Easy Pass account. That's a step taken to full collections on the 10-cent toll that was passed by the General Assembly on, I think it was July 3rd, and was implemented starting August 19th.
All due respect to David, who really, I think, is just bearing with the nonsense from the General Assembly and the situation that's been handed to him. For those of you who get a bill for $2.50, send it back in dimes. Really, roll up the dimes, put it in a perforated envelope, or not perforated, the bubble wrap or whatever, and send it back to him, 25 dimes. That'll send the message. It's ridiculous. To Washington, where they're counting a lot more than dimes, or may not be after 8 days from now. We're right up against this debt ceiling decision deadline time, and John Boehner responded to the president, who we showed last night. Today he had, late yesterday, he had this to say.
I didn't come here to shut down the government. I certainly didn't come here to default on our debt. But when it comes to the debt limit, again, over the last 40 years, 27 times the debt limit has been used to carry significant policy changes that would, in fact, reduce spending and put us on a saner fiscal path.
Listen, this is a very, very interesting time right now in America's history, despite all of this historical perspective on how many times we've been here before. Reportedly today, the president began to invite in constituencies. House Democrats first, then Senate Democrats, and then the scary House Republicans. And the leaks are that the Republicans, under the tutelage and leadership of John Boehner, are going to remove Obamacare from the debate on the debt ceiling, which would be probably pretty smart, since that's the one that could put them over the edge. There's a 2014 election where you most likely will have a better chance of impacting Obamacare, especially when people find out how not so good it is. And speaking of not so good for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays last night. They had their backs to the wall for what, the 4th straight time, and this time they couldn't pull it off. So good for the Sox. Congratulations to them. Red Sox Nation rejoicing as they move on against either Detroit or Oakland. I'm just wondering what's growing in them beards. I mean, this World Series cannot come soon enough for me. Every time I see these guys, I'm thinking, what's in that nasty, nappy thing? But maybe that's just the Yankee fan in me. When we come back, sorry, I'll get some feedback on that, I'm sure. We come back, let's figure out whether or not we ought to arm these police at URI. Don't go anywhere. So welcome back. This question of arming the URI campus police, I have to be honest with you, I'm puzzled by how controversial this thing is. I know guns and arming people, period, are you know, get people all crazy. But after what happened at URI last April 4th, we've got some, as we call in the business, B-roll of that event that we can put up for you. It just seems to be a no-brainer. But you know what? I got to listen. I got to listen to both sides of the argument. There was the day that some kid was, well, you know what? I'll have the Director of Public Safety, Stephen Baker, explain what happened on that particular day. And Mary Joe Gonzales is here. She's the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at URI. That's a big title.
That is a big title.
Nice to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Director,
Hi.
Major,
How you
great
doing?
to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming. So, give me the play-by-play on what happened back on April 4th. This is not the only reason you're having this discussion. It's been a long time
It's
coming.
been going on since at least 2001, maybe even before that.
But on that day,
just by coincidence, I happened to be in my office giving an interview to two students who were talking about the arming of campus police. And,
really?
That's
what,
when
for the student newspaper or something like that?
I think it was a project for their
Okay.
class. It was towards the end of the semester, and I heard the call over the radio that there was a call at Chafee Hall, a potential person with a gun inside the building. So obviously, I left right away for Chafee. We had two officers on scene within 45 seconds. We found that a very large auditorium room of about 250 students had evacuated on their own.
Man, they piled out of there, didn't they?
They were
left
obviously
everything.
They were obviously scared. They left
Yeah.
computers, their cell phones and everything behind. And obviously, because our officers are unarmed, we could not enter the building to find out what was going on. We had to wait for South Kingston. We immediately called for South Kingston. Also immediately put out the notice to start an alert to notify the rest of the campus.
How long did it take before the place was secured by armed police?
Well, we had about 18 South Kingston officers there within about 15, 20 minutes. By the time they had to go into the building, they made an initial search. They could not get into all of the rooms initially, so that was probably about 45 minutes into it. We kept the campus in a lockdown, and state police were also called in to do a further search.
Were you there that day?
That was actually my 4th day of work.
Really?
So yes, I was there.
Congratulations on
It
your
was
new job.
It was a great opportunity to learn how we navigate emergency and crisis on campus, and you can't practice those kinds of incidents.
Do you remember what it was like?
Yes, I was actually 2 buildings away. We had heard, as I was in a meeting, we got interrupted by a student, and the student said, there's reports of a gun at Chafee, and so 2 of us walked out. I was with another administrator. We walked out, we saw what was happening, and happened to interact with a lot of the students who were in the classroom, and they were scared. They piled out of the room. They were fearful for their lives, and because when you hear that word nowadays, gun, students don't know how to react, humans don't know how to react, and so they were concerned about their safety, very much so.
So what has changed from that day of fear to now the deliberation over arming these police officers? The pulse of the student body has moved into a different direction?
I'm not sure that the pulse of the student body has moved into a different direction. I think that the campus is really faced with, how do we manage that fear? Is it fear of having a gun on campus with our university police, or is it the fear of not having the gun on campus, and what does it mean to have to wait for South Kingston Police Department to get there to be our first responders? So I think part of the conversation is both faculty and students are struggling with that dilemma. I know that the Faculty Senate has a very clear position on it, meaning that they want a firearms free.
Yeah, we should put that up, Lord. We've got 2 resolutions. This one is the Student Senate that passed a resolution that more or less is saying, and they'd like to see some arms stowed too.
Exactly.
Mr. Director, I'm not exactly sure when a guy is coming your way that you say, "Hold, Mr. Criminal, could you hold on for a second? I got to go get my gun."
Right. There's obviously some cons to that concept. We would prefer to have the firearms at our side immediately because, just like you said, you don't know when that you're not going to have time to go back to the station.
And then the Faculty Senate. Here's the second resolution. They very simply put up a kind of a one-liner that everyone could sign on to. That says, The Faculty Senate at the University of Rhode Island reaffirms the longstanding tradition and policy of having a firearms-free campus. Am I supposed to sing tradition at this point? I mean,
well, I think
tradition.
part of it is, you know, we talk a lot about faculty having control of the classroom. You know, as the individuals who are running the class and leading the class, they want to have control of the class. And I think many of them might be very fearful of having a gun in the classroom. And a part of that meaning that if it does happen, if an incident does happen, how do they respond? And they're not sure. And so part of the conversations that we're having right now as the discussion goes on about arming is, what do we do for emergency preparedness and crisis response? We're having to have some of those very important conversations.
Okay, well, what's interesting about this is that, you know, Mary Jo's excellent in articulating the concerns. You know what I do when I'm worried about security issues? I talk to security people. So maybe the director can answer some of these questions when we come back. Stay with us. Terrific. Very good job. Thanks. Welcome back with our URI Director of Public Safety. And Mary just got a big title, Assistant VP for Student Affairs and Dean of Students. She's the one that when you really got trouble, you go in and say, help me, Mary Jo. You know, I got a college kid, yes. So you have a very important job. And I should point out that you're really not taking a stand on this armed police officer thing, but you're reflecting the position of those you work with and who you are assigned to help the kids.
Absolutely.
All right, so all of these concerns that Mary Jo has so articulately offered here today, I think ought to be answered by the people who we pay to actually provide those answers.
Okay.
Like the cops on campus, all due respect, right?
I'd be happy to try.
Yeah, so without getting into a lot of history, your police officers are trained, they go to the academy.
That's correct.
The only thing they're not bringing to the table is the 9mm on their hip, right?
Right. We have 3 officers in the academy right now going through firearms training. They're probably going to finish up on their training this week. They have to pass firearms training to pass the academy, and if they don't pass the academy, they don't work for us.
And they're retired police officers, some of them, or former municipal?
A few of them are, like myself, but most are officers that we have sent to the academy.
You worked for who before you came to URI?
Westerly.
All right, and you had a gun on you the entire time of your career?
26 years with
What's
the
it like to end up, you know, being weaponless in an environment of a village of 17,000 people plus on the campus?
Well, obviously I knew that coming in, but the very first car stop I made, I was reaching for, you know, as a protection, my firearm, just out of habit, and it wasn't there. And it's kind of scary if you're doing that at 2 o'clock in the morning. I have a lot of respect for our officers who stop suspicious vehicles in the middle of the night, not knowing where they stop.
Do the kids look at these guys as wannabes? Is that, do you hear that vernacular come out of their mouths?
No, I don't. What I hear is absolutely
them.
They respect the police officers. We know that they take care of us when incidents happen, when they're injured, skateboarding down the Elephant Walk. The police are typically the first ones there, so I don't believe that's the sense at all. In fact, I believe that they often respect our police officers, and that's why I think Student Senate advocated for arming the police back in 2009 and continue to reiterate that support for them.
Dave Dooley's going to, all due respect, pull the trigger on this, all pun intended, right? He's,
you know, obviously he'll have to make a decision. I hope it's made.
He's already proffered that his common sense dictates that this is probably where we ought to end up.
I mean, obviously I have my opinion.
You can't speak for it. I know that, but it seems to me that the president, Dr. David Dooley, is going to go that way. What's going to happen? There's 2 more hearings, by the way, on October 28th and the 30th. One on campus like it was on Monday, and then one at the Feinstein building downtown in Providence on the 30th, I believe. Right. What's going to happen with the faculty and the students if he says, thanks for your input, appreciate it, but I'm going that way? Is it going to be turbulent?
Well, what I would say is I think that's part of the strategy why we're engaging in the forums is because we really want to hear all perspectives. And, you know, I sit there and I hear students passionately talk about needing to have firearms arms on campus, and then I also hear another student saying, I'm fearful to have one. So I think what's going to happen is all of that information is going to be taken into account. It's going to probably be brought to the faculty senate leaders, the student senate leaders, and the president to have some serious dialogue about where we go from here. You and I both know what's happening across the country, some of the incidents that are happening, and we need, in my opinion, we need to make a decision, and I think the president is going to move in that direction once he gathers the information from our campus.
Where's the forum for the mommies and the daddies? Now, not every kid at URI is having mommy and daddy pay the tuition. I understand that reality. But I'm a daddy paying tuition. It would be a 2-second conversation. Arm them. Thank you. Move on.
Steve and
Study.
I, yeah, we happened to do a presentation together at Orientation for Parents, and one of the parents was from Connecticut, and whose, I believe it was her son, had been in the Connecticut incident, or near the Connecticut incident, and so the conversation was, what about my son? And that, I think, is a very legitimate question. I would encourage anyone who has concerns to go to the website and post their comments, because again, that's a part of the dialogue.
And parents, many of whom are regional, local, can come to these hearings.
Absolutely, absolutely.
30 seconds, Mr. Director.
Yeah.
Sell everybody on the reason that once and for all, the URI police officers ought to be armed.
Well, our officers are trained just as well as the South Kingston police officers, any other municipal police officer. They will be the first responder, and to not give them the tools to do their job and to possibly save somebody's life is in my opinion, unconscionable.
And your brethren, South Kingstown, State Police, they
Right.
support it too.
They do. Yes, they do. And they've always been there to back us up, but there's going to be a time where there's not going to be time for that. And we, you know, as I said, we have the training. All we need is the tool.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Again, those hearings are later in the month, the 28th and the 30th. Check the website at URI. Your State of Mind. When we return, stay with us.
I'm glad you brought the
Alrighty, Your State of Mind, where you can feedback on the phone, on social media, on email, you know, the old-fashioned email, all that kind of stuff. What do we have in our grab bag of feedback today? First one up is from Ryan. Dan Yorke Show just called North Providence the center of the universe. This from our discussion with Mayor Charlie Lombardi last night, where he talked about privatizing the Department of Public Works. Yeah, well, listen, actually, it's Johnston that I always call the center of the universe. But because North Providence is contiguous, and because you really, if you didn't have a town line, you wouldn't know the difference between a Johnstoner and a North Providencer, we'll call it the semi-center of the universe. And then we have this on that conversation about arming police officers. Cops without guns, isn't that like firefighters without water? Well, maybe firefighters without a hose. Water is to bullets as hose would be to weapon. I like analogies. Hey, offer me one yourself. Feedback on what we're doing here, Your State of Mind. You offer us a voicemail, and we'll record it, and we'll air it. 228-1886. Email me at stateofmind@myRITV.com. And, of course, through Twitter and Facebook, it's Dan Yorke Show. Don't forget the E. We're back here tomorrow night, 7:30, myRITV. Dan Yorke out. Thanks for joining State of Mind.